All right, y'all, welcome to the show. Today, we're going to talk about, we have a pro-Palestine guest went on CNN and just absolutely ran circles around the host and really gave that audience a learning. So a lot of stuff to get to on that. We have an MSNBC host, shockingly, came out and torched Netanyahu coming to speak to Congress. We'll have Biden was protested at his own rally, but it was not by MAGA. It was by the left. And then later on, we tried to get to this story the other day. We didn't have time, but Jon Stewart was asked if he'll run for president, and he didn't say no. He did not say no. So we'll talk about all that and more. Everybody do me a big favor. Please subscribe to the channel. That helps out massively in the algorithm. It costs you nothing at all. And let's dive into it. So friend of the show, Omar Badr, went on CNN. This is in the wake of 4 Israeli hostages being released in a special forces operation, but at the same time, they killed 274 innocent civilians, injured 698, and also managed to kill, allegedly, 3 other hostages. So this has widely been celebrated in Western media circles. Biden did a press conference where he talked about it in positive terms. This is beyond deranged, to say the very least, but Omar Badr got on CNN here, and the rest is history. Let's dive in, and we'll break it down as we go.
There's no question, I know there's some dispute about the specific numbers, but what unfolded yesterday was unquestionably a massacre. We have seen the images of the bodies of children littering the streets. We've seen the horrific scenes at the hospitals of weeping parents and bloody children. And to look at an incident of that scale, to see that many casualties, and to celebrate this as any kind of success, is effectively to say that the lives of Israelis are more valuable than the lives of Palestinians. That is the only way anybody can celebrate this as a success. Now, it's unsurprising that that's the view of the Israeli government. They've made it absolutely clear that they don't value Palestinian lives at all, not just throughout this campaign of assault on Gaza over the past several months, but Israeli policy towards Palestinians for much, much longer. What has been disappointing is the way our government also has reduced the massacre to a footnote and focused primarily on the retrieval of hostages. And Frederica, all you have to do is just imagine the reverse scenario. Right now, as we speak, there are thousands of Palestinians who have been kidnapped out of Gaza, placed in Israeli detention without any charge or trial. There's an article in the New York Times outlining the absolute horrific abuse they are undergoing on a daily basis. And if Hamas today were to carry out an incursion into Gaza, kill a couple of hundred Israelis, and then retrieve 4 Palestinians, would anyone in our discourse be celebrating this as some kind of victory? Would anyone even know the names of the 4 Palestinians who have been rescued from Israeli detention? We know the answer to that. And that's because we currently have a moment in which it's incredibly upsetting, the fact that we don't see Palestinian lives as equal or as deserving of the same kind of concern. And we carry on just accepting this mantra of Palestinians as collateral damage.
That's a devastating point. So in other words, the IDF, with allegedly help from U.S. Special Forces too, goes in, rescues 4 hostages, kills 3 other hostages, including an American, kills 274 and injures 698. Just reverse the scenario. How would people react if Hamas went into Israel, freed 4 of the Palestinian hostages? By the way, Israel has thousands of them. And in the process, kills 274 Israelis, including dozens of children, and wounds 698. How would it be talked about? I know how it'd be talked about. It'd be talked about like it was another October 7th. Because they killed 274 innocent people, including dozens of kids, wounding 698. There is no imaginable scenario where you reverse it and everybody celebrates. Yay, we freed 4. But largely, that is what Western media has done. Now, again, I'm actually amazed that they let Omar on here to spit facts, but he's doing exactly that. But Omar, allow me to say in advance, this is your last time on CNN is my guess, right? Because he's flying a little too close to the sun here, man, by telling the truth on this network. Here we go.
So when you hear the National Security Advisor Sullivan saying the preference is a ceasefire from this point forward, do you believe it's possible, and or do you believe that the release or rescue of more hostages can come without the cost of civilian lives?
Yeah, Frederica, it's even more than just civilian lives. The Israeli insistence on pursuing the release of hostages through purely military means has, in fact, killed far more Israeli hostages than they have rescued. And I'm talking about Israeli bullets and Israeli bombs that cost the lives of their own hostages.
That's a fact. That's a fact. And they don't own up to it. First of all, nobody even talks about the white flag waivers anymore. hostages who had escaped and were waving white flags and got gunned down by the IDF, the endless aerial bombardment, which has killed their own hostages. Nobody even talks about that. By the way, how were most hostages freed? It was the temporary pause where 105 of them were released. Now we're pretending like negotiation and diplomacy doesn't work, and you got to do this shoot 'em up style, which kills 274 innocent civilians with it. Beyond preposterous.
There's no question that a ceasefire and an agreement to exchange hostages is the only path forward in which you can guarantee the safety both of Israelis and Palestinians out of all this. We've seen the biggest number of hostages being released the last time there was a temporary ceasefire in which we agreed for an exchange of hostages and prisoners between the two sides. And that is obviously the path forward. There is currently a deal on the table that basically says in exchange for the end of this war on Gaza that has just utterly devastated Gaza, killed nearly 40,000 people. In exchange for an end to that war, Israel can get all of its hostages back without another person being killed from this point moving forward. There's simply no reason not to accept that, except it seems that the Israeli government's goal of destroying Gaza seems to rank much higher than the lives of their own hostages, which is why we're stuck in this grotesque scenario.
Nobody's saying that on CNN, bro. This is the first person I've ever heard say that on CNN. It's true. It's true. That's what they rank as the highest priority. That's what they rank as the highest priority. It's not even, defeating Hamas. It's not saving the hostages. It's, as Ben-Gvir and Smotrich have said repeatedly, it's reoccupying Gaza and doing voluntary resettlement. That's a very kind way of putting lipstick on a pig of ethnic cleansing. And he's saying it on CNN. Oh, my God. Omar, you're killing it, man.
It's why Netanyahu seems to be beholden to the fanatical wing of his own government, who are insisting that the ultimate goal has to be either the ethnic cleansing of Gaza or the permanent reoccupation of Gaza. And we're stuck in this situation where there is no real plan for what happens after this war. And in the meantime, people are going to continue to get killed. The fact that the United States, that the President Biden clearly has some tensions with Netanyahu. Unfortunately, those tensions have not led to any real or meaningful pressure. The only way President Biden can actually change Netanyahu's behavior is by credibly threatening to withhold U.S. military funding for Israel if Netanyahu does not change course. That, unfortunately, does not seem to be on the table. But I think Gantz is banking on that pressure ramping up moving forward and is trying to express a more clear and decisive disagreement with Netanyahu, hoping that when there is more mounting American and domestic Israeli pressure on Netanyahu, that he might potentially be there to essentially reap the benefits of that discontentment and take charge. But ultimately, really, we're stuck in a situation in which you need a ceasefire. That ceasefire can only be brought about through American meaningful pressure. And that has to mean that America cannot continue just providing unconditional military funding, knowing how these weapons are being used, knowing that every major human rights organization in the world is describing Israeli bombings in Gaza as indiscriminate, as costing too many civilian lives. That is not something that the United States should be complicit in. It's really way belatedly about time to say that we have to put an end to that kind of support in order to achieve that meaningful change, regardless of what Israeli prime minister happens to be in charge when that change comes about.
Like I said, I'd be shocked if they let him back on. I would be shocked. He said a lot of things that you're not allowed to say. But he's right. He's right about every single one of them. By the way, to Benny Gantz stepping down, the so-called centrist, he's centrist relative to the other super far-right psychos. But him stepping down, it might be bad in the short run, because then you're basically handing the entire government over to Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, and Netanyahu, and the coalition is even further to the right than it was before. There's no brakes on the car, not even a little bit. And they might ramp up the atrocities. But then again, that in turn could lead to more international pressure. That could lead to more countries isolating Israel as the rogue state that they are, cutting off trade, etc. And in the grander scheme of things, it could lead to the collapse of Israel quicker. So, I don't know. There's a bunch of different ways to look at that. But ultimately, I think Omar is right that it's sort of him positioning himself for, let's get this government to collapse, and then I'm going to step in and I'm going to be the one who has the backing of the U.S. I think that's his gamble. His gamble is, it's going to be my day soon, and I'm going to have the backing of the U.S., because basically his line is, I will be a more efficient puppet to the U.S. And if Biden says don't go into Rafah, I actually won't go into Rafah, right? And things of that nature. If you listen to the U.S. more, it's not like the U.S. isn't going to give Israel a tremendous amount of leeway to do the ethnic cleansing and the genocide they have to this point. But he's like, hey, idiots, you need some plausible deniability. You need it to not be this brazen, not be this overt, not be this clear, not lead to this much international backlash. You have to be tactical and pragmatic about it. I think that's the U.S.'s position, and that's Gantz's position, and Netanyahu is clearly caving to the far right more so to save his own political ass, and he wants the war to go on as long as humanly possible, because that's how he stays in power. Second it's over, his ass is going gonzo, son. There's no doubt about it. So he's like, fuck it, let's just keep it going. So that's where we are. But Omar, phenomenal job there on CNN. Like I said, it might be your last appearance on there, but it was a very substantive one, and we appreciate it. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.